Is your law firm completely dependent on you? Well, if that's the case, don't worry, you're not alone. My very good friend, attorney George McCraney, when I first met him and his wife Danielle, George couldn't get home in time for dinner. George didn't have weekends to himself. And Danielle used to bring their youngest child to the office in the car seat and set it on the desk while she worked. And it meant that they missed many, many milestones. Why? Well, because George thought he always had to go to court. He had to be the lawyer. It all had to depend on him. And he spent thousands of miles every single week going to and from and barely seeing his family. And then we spent some time together, and he started working on systems that run his law firm. And he took a 7-step approach. And today, George and Danielle, well, they've got a different life. They go horseback riding with their daughter all over the country as she goes through competitions. And they do what they want to do when they want to do it. They don't even have to work in the office. And as far as George is concerned, he doesn't go to court any longer. They have a multiple 7-figure firm that's highly profitable, and it supports their lifestyle in the way that they want to live it. And again, it's all because they decided to build systems that run their law firm and let people run their systems. And there's 7 very clear steps that I'm going to show you today that by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what you can do to have that kind of life too. Let's get to it, shall we? So tell me, does this sound like you? Do you find that you're doing all of the legal work? Well, here's the good news. Those are just the symptoms. It's not the real problem. The real problem is that you're missing one very vital system, and that's called the new client attraction pipeline. And there are 7 simple steps that I'm going to share with you today that are going to break down what you have to do to build the new client attraction pipeline. So let's get started. Step number 1 is leads. So what does that mean? Well, you need a lead generation system. Now, if you say to me, Rich, we've got more than enough leads, great, stick with me. I'm going to get to the next part in just a second. But I don't want to overlook this important section because for some firms, the reason why they struggle the way they do is they have these feast and famine cycles where they have months where they get a lot of leads and they have months where they get very few leads because most of the leads come in by referral or simply organically. You need to start to take control over your lead generation system. And listen, there's 4 simple ways to accomplish this. There is a simple quadrant, and you can either generate leads by a pay per lead. You can generate leads through what we call traditional advertising. You know what they are, right? And you can generate leads through digital media. And you can generate leads through referrals, okay? So what is the right answer? Well, pay-per-leads are the fastest, but they're the lowest converting. Traditional marketing like newspapers, TV, radio, direct mail, billboards, those types of things, well, they can have great brand equity, but they take a while to figure out what's going to be the best strategy, and they usually have a high threshold for an investment to get involved. Digital media has all sorts of different subcategories like SEO and Google My Business and LSAs are where they are today, but there's also things like paid Google ads, paid Facebook ads, and the such. There are many, many paths inside the digital media path. Well, the good news is digital media is also fast and efficient, and so you can get started relatively quickly inside of digital media if you don't have anything right now. And referral development is just basically, as you know, the old-fashioned way, building leads by building a referral base. Now, there's a structural scientific way to go about doing this so you can build referrals that you can depend on. So the question is, where do you start? The answer is it really doesn't matter. It just depends on what your goal is. Are you looking for speed? Or are you willing to take some more time to develop something? Or would you like a mix of both in digital media? Or do you just really love building from referrals? No wrong answer, but you have to decide where you're going to start. And once you decide where you're going to start, then you can go by systematically creating that singular lead source. Now here's this inside secret. One lead source can generate you millions of dollars of business. One lead source can generate you millions of dollars of business. Once we get leads, we can start to get to the next stage. So let's talk about the next stage, which is stage 2. Step 2, sets. So the second part of the new client attraction pipeline is this idea of setting the appointment. And so for some of you, you already have plenty of leads. But what you need to do is you need to work on your intake system. Giving you more leads might actually be a sin because you're not doing a great job of converting the leads you already have when they first come into your firm. And so how do you do that? Well, there are 2 important things that you absolutely must do when you're dealing with your intake system. The first is that you need a system for a script and a structure. And the second is you need inspection. Now, those are the 2 important steps. Surrounding this, you need ongoing training. So in order for you to be willing to do this, you have to believe that it's important. Because if you don't believe that it's important, you're not going to commit to it, and your team's not going to commit to it either. So from the top down, you have to be the one that decides this is how the sausage is made in our firm, right? This is the way the cow goes through the pasture and eats the grass, like my grandfather used to say. We are committed to doing it like this. So when your team says, I don't want to read a script, I don't want to follow a system, I don't want to be inspected, and I don't want to go through training, your responsibility as the owner is to say, tough. This is how we're going to do it. Because if you don't do that, that means the tail is wagging the dog. And so if you want to improve your intake, you must commit to scripts, structure, inspection, and training. You're going to see that this is a constant theme as we roll through this process. But once we start improving the number of appointments that we set as compared to the number of leads that we receive, we're talking about qualified leads. By the way, we'll call that the set rate. Once we have the set rate developed, then we have to move on to the third step in the system. Hey, if you're not sure how this whole thing is going to work in your firm, we've made it really easy for you. We call it the Perfect Client Lifecycle Calculator, or your PCLC for short. And so if you just go to yourpclc.com, we'll put the link in the description. You can go in there and you can plug your numbers in, and you can determine if you made changes in the set rate, in the show rate, in the hire rate, in your case value, in your realization rate. What would that mean to the bottom line of your firm? And then, if you're not sure exactly how to use the calculator, or you're not sure how it pertains to your firm, or you're not sure what to do with the information once you have it, you can schedule a call with our team, and we'll be happy to take some time and walk you through it step by step. Go ahead and grab that calculator right now. It's free and it's easy to use. The third step in the system we call show. What does that mean exactly? Well, just because you set somebody in an appointment doesn't mean they're necessarily going to show to the appointment. So you have to measure what's called a show rate. What is a show rate? Well, it really just determines of the people that set an appointment, how many of them actually show to the appointment. What's interesting, a lot of times when we ask attorneys this question, they don't know the answer because they're not tracking this. They're not measuring how many people actually show. Usually the way I get to this answer is I'll say to them, so listen, if you've got 10 appointments on your calendar this week with new prospects, do you think it's likely that they're all going to show up, half of them are going to show up, or none of them are going to show up? And that gives them some range. Oh, a little bit more than half, or a little bit less than all, right? And so you start to get a feel. But really what you need to know is exactly what your show rate is. And so when you can measure what your show rate is, you can start to take things to affect the change. What things should you do to affect the change? All that means is it's called a reminder sequence. All this is a reminder sequence. And there are many, many things that you can do inside of a reminder sequence. But fundamentally, there are a few core things that you're going to pay attention to. The first is, Are we reminding them through email? Are we reminding them through text messaging? Are we reminding them with the phone? Are we using direct mail? Those are fundamentally the core 4 things that you would do to manage a reminder sequence. Now, this all gets wrapped with what we call content. So what we say, what we send, whether it's a video, whether it's an audio, whether it's written, that kind of wraps around whether we send it by email, text, phone, or direct mail. And there's some things that work better than others. Your job as the owner of the firm is to figure out which combination works best for your practice area and your geographic area so you can maximize the show rate. Which leads me to the next step that you have to absolutely get right. So many firms I've worked with through the years, when I ask them how many people retain the firm that they meet with, they usually say, oh, if they meet with me, I close the deal. Maybe you feel like that too. Look, when I first met with Scott David Stewart back in 2009, he told me flat out that they have an 80% close rate. 80% of the time when they meet with somebody, they retain the firm. And then we started tracking it, and we found out that wasn't actually the case. The truth was it was more around 40%. And so we immediately went to work to increase something that we called hires. So what is hires exactly? Well, hires is what we call the number of people who retain the firm. And the number of people who retain the firm as compared to the number of people who showed to their appointment during a set period of time would be considered a higher rate or a percentage point. Now you might say to me, what exactly is the right percentage point or the higher rate for my firm? And the answer is, it depends. I don't mean to sound like an attorney, but it does depend. It depends on your practice area. So if you were, say, a bankruptcy firm, I would expect your hire rate to be north of 70%. And I've seen hire rates as high as averaging in the 80s. If you're an estate planning firm, your hire rate should be north of 75%. And I've seen hire rates bordering around 85 to 90% in estate planning firms that do this right. If you're a criminal firm, you should have a hire rate somewhere between 55 and 65%, sometimes pushing as high as 70 to 75. I've seen that happen, but I would like to see you somewhere in that 60% range. If you're a family law firm, where should you be? Somewhere, again, between that 60 to 70% range. I would shoot for something closer to 65%. Have I seen it higher? Sure I have. Where do we go from here? You have estate planning, you have bankruptcy, criminal, family law. Are there other practice areas? Of course there are. Tax resolution, immigration, business transactional. All of these things have similar type close rates to what you're seeing here. Depending on the practice area, we may fluctuate one way or the other. Do you know what the average close rate is for a firm that we meet with? Oh, it's around 37.5% is the average close rate for all the practice areas that we meet with when they first start into our world. And so measuring what your hire rate is and getting the truth about what's actually happening in your firm is the very first thing you have to do. Now, some people say, well, Rich, how do I go about fixing that? Well, it's pretty simple, actually. The first thing that you have to do in order to fix your hire rate is the same thing you have to do to fix your set rate. You have to make sure you have a system for scripts and structures. And you have to have inspection. And both of these get wrapped with training. Which means the owner of the firm has to be committed to this process. Because if the owner of the firm isn't committed to this process, what happens is your salespeople, whether they be attorney salespeople or non-attorney salespeople, they don't want to do this. They don't want to follow a script. They don't want to follow a structure. They don't want to be inspected, and they probably don't want training. because that feels inconvenient, and oftentimes it shines a light on what's working and what's not working, and they'd rather sleep in the dark. So here's the truth. If you decide that this is important and wants it needs to happen, then they will in turn do it, or they'll get off the bus. And when that happens, you can replace them with somebody who will actually pay attention to scripting, inspection, as well as training. And when you do, you're going to see your close rate go up. When you increase your close rate, you don't need more leads. You actually close more deals without getting more leads because you increased your close rate. So this leads us to the fifth step, and we call this PIF, paid in full. Now, PIF has a couple of different angles to it. So the first is maximizing price. So we want to close more deals, and we want to close more deals at the right fee, not at a cheap fee. Never be the cheapest. Always have your fee properly priced. The second thing we want is we want more people to pay their fee in full. Why? Because when you get more people to pay their fee in full, you have to chase less money. And if you're always chasing money, you're always going to be chasing money. That receivable account that you have that you're always chasing, that's a number that you will forever chase, and it will get bigger as your firm gets bigger. So you want to maximize your ability to get paid in full. How do you ensure that you get paid in full? Well, let me tell it to you like this, or let me ask you a question. On a scale from 1 to 10, how good are your clients at managing their own personal money? I'll spoil alert, most attorneys tell me that they're somewhere around a 2 to a 5. They're not very good at managing their own personal money. There are exceptions to be sure, but most aren't. Now the next question is, how important is cash flow to your law firm? Well, the answer is, it's like an 11, kind of like oxygen, right? Yeah. So here's the pregnant question. Why in the world would we let people who are a 2 to a 5 at managing their money out of 10 manage something that's like an 11 as important to the firm like cash flow? What I mean by that is most firms allow their clients to dictate terms. They don't control this process. So during the initial consultation, all you have to do is make sure that when you craft your script, you make sure that you pay attention to getting as much money down as you can. And for any money that you don't get down, you make a rule that anybody can hire you for whatever amount of money that you allow them to hire you, and you'll put them on a payment plan, but they can't go on a payment plan unless they agree to the payment plan right here and now in the consultation room. And that's the secret. You have to get the plan in place during the initial consultation. If you get the plan in place during the initial consultation, you will increase the amount of money that you receive month after month after month in payments. And if you focus on building your script so that you capture as much money down as possible and give them a clear way to pay you in full, all of a sudden you're going to receive more money down as an average than you did before. So if you do those things, you're going to increase what we call your paid in full rate. Most firms collect less than 85% of their total receivables, like total dollars that they bill. They get about an 85% realization rate. Many firms are down in the 70s or lower. The great firms are at 90 or higher. The best, they're at 92, 93, 94% receivable rate, which means they only lose $5 out of every $100 they bill. But if you're a firm that collects at 70%, now you're losing $30 out of every $100 you bill. Think about the difference that that's going to make to the cash flow of your business. Now, the final step in this whole process, or at least one of the final steps in this whole process, is train. So I had mentioned this earlier when we had talked about the script and we had talked about the structure in both the intake world and the initial consultation world. But truth be told, this is true all the way through lead generation, all the way through to collections. It's vital that we have a training system in place to ensure that our staff knows exactly what it is we want them to do. If we don't have a training process in place to train everybody to do things the way we want them to do, then what happens is we never know what's actually going to happen. And what we want to happen isn't actually what happens. And so we want to close the gap. We want to make what actually happens much closer to what we want to happen. And the way that we do that is we train people on how to use the system we created. And the system inside the new client attraction pipeline allows this to happen. Now, why does this all matter? Why does this all matter? Well, remember when I told you that George McCraney and Danielle really didn't have much of a life? One of the reasons why they didn't have much of a life is because their mindset thought that this is how things had to be. So the first thing we did is we changed their mindset. The second thing we did is start working on the new client attraction pipeline. This did two fundamental things. It brought in more clients without spending more money on marketing, and it brought them in at a higher value with more money down. Now, when we were able to do those two things, it created more cash. That additional cash allowed room in the profit and loss statement to be able to go out and hire George help to do the legal work. And once they got addicted to that process, they just never stopped. Which leads me to the next step that we have to pay attention to. Step 7 is that we have to test and we have to refine. So listen, I'm not going to tell you that this is easy. I would be lying to you if I said it was easy. It's simple, but it's not easy. The reason it's not easy is because it's going to feel like you're changing the brakes on the car as you're driving down the road. And that feels complicated and clunky and chaotic. And all those things are true in the beginning. And it takes time to work on this. But as you start to make some of these changes, what you're going to find is that you're going to create more cash. And as you create more cash, you need to take some of that cash and use it to buy your freedom. How do you buy your freedom? You start to replace yourself in different things that you do. We've made other videos about that in the past. You can check them out where we talk about replacing yourself. But for now, just know that once you create more cash, you'll have the liquidity to be able to hire the right team. And once you hire the right team, they'll be able to replace you. And once you get replaced, you're going to have more time. And one of the things that you do with your time that you absolutely must do is you must invest that into testing and refining. Because while it's great to think in theory that we've got this magic wand that we just say, okay, here's the system and it works, it's not like that in business. Oftentimes in business, unlike in law, we're wrong more often than we're right. And so we have to try what works for your practice area in your geographic region with your team and your clients. And we have to figure out what formula makes sense for you. So sure, there's a framework to use, and we definitely share that with you like we're talking about here. But the key is that you're going to have to test and refine, and test and refine. And that takes time, which is why I need to get you out of the seat that you're in and into the seat of being the business owner. I want you to shift the paradigm. Rather than being a lawyer who happens to own a law firm, I want you to be a business owner who chose law as the service type. And that's a paradigm shift in thinking. And when you get there, you'll know that building your new client attraction pipeline, maximizing lead generation and lead conversion techniques so that you can generate the highest quality clients at the highest quality level for the lowest quality cost is going to lead to more cash. And that cash is going to lead for you to be able to replace yourself in the roles that you're currently doing. And then you can invest your time in improving and refining this system. And then you can go on to the next system. But for today, I hope that you found this helpful. If you'd like to learn more about these 7 steps or other systems that we teach you to build, and you're listening to this on your favorite podcast, well, you can head over to YouTube and we've got more videos there, or we've got other episodes of the podcast where we interview attorneys just like you who have actually implemented these systems and have had great results. We'd love to walk alongside you as you build your law firm one system at a time. Hey, if you're not sure how this whole thing is going to work in your firm, we've made it really easy for you. We call it the Perfect Client Lifecycle Calculator, or your PCLC for short. And so if you just go to yourpclc.com, we'll put the link in the description. You can go in there and you can plug your numbers in, and you can determine if you made changes in the set rate, in the show rate, in the hire rate, in your case value, in your realization rate. What would that mean to the bottom line of your firm? And then, if you're not sure exactly how to use the calculator, or you're not sure how it pertains to your firm, or you're not sure what to do with the information once you have it, you can schedule a call with our team, and we'll be happy to take some time and walk you through it step by step. Go ahead and grab that calculator right now. It's free and it's easy to use.